All order. United States. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah. Here.
Mr. Brady. Mr. Holmes. Mr. Lylio. Mr. Paradise.
Here.
Great.
Very much. Hey, how you doing? How we doing? Weeks since I seen you. All the comments.
Meeting September 14th.
16, 2021. The minutes. Discussion. Favor? Aye. New business. Discussion items for new money for debt.
All right, this is the start of our budget process. The very start. The first thing we always look at is debt service. Obviously, existing debt we have to fund. In your packet are three items that I'll reference. One is this chart. This is the chart that I made reference to last time. That I shared with Sal and a couple folks from the advisory committee for the Community Senior Center. This is the existing debt schedule, so no new debt was issued. Where we stand, so today, $81.6 million of outstanding total debt, principal and interest. And then as you work through from fiscal year 22 on down, if we issued no more debt, you can see the total debt and debt-like balance, 72.8, 64.3, et cetera. Number comes back, comes down. The second item I'll reference is the chart that has project amount authorized across the top. Says fire vehicles, athletic facilities improvements. This is the authorized but unissued bonding right now. So the town has authorized the issuance of just shy of $6.8 million of debt that has not been issued. So it's basically the legal authority to borrow. We obviously cannot borrow any money that is not authorized. And as we borrow, either the project's completed and there's authorization left, and I go back either to the Board of Finance Council and deauthorize the only debt, essentially like canceling the credit card. You know? Or we've used up all of the money, which typically would happen when we bonded for roads and things like that. We would use up all of the money. And then that would go to zero, all of the rest. So as we start thinking about new money bonding, so projects that we would potentially bond, we talk about fire vehicles in a few minutes. We obviously have the HVAC at the schools that we talked about with ARPA funds, but also with borrowing. There's continued needs for bridge work, police station work, the statement of need has been brought forward. And then there's some other items. So with that in mind, I added a third piece, which was with your information tonight that I didn't packet, which is the capital improvement plan bond ban details. So this kind of shows FY23, which would be borrowed in June of 2022 on out. You were to take the capital plan and think about the next few years. Looking at FY23, there were really three items that we were initially focused on. One was HVAC at will. If you were to choose to use ARPA funds for that, you would be able to avoid that borrowing, at least in 23. Fire vehicles, so we had money in there, as well as the parking lot at Willard. A couple of years ago, we did the parking lot at Griswold. School parking lots are in need of work as well as many of them, but the idea was if we're gonna do HVAC and move summer school out of Willard, let's do the parking lot at the same time. And that way, if you just move it one summer and you take care of the schools. So the reason for this discussion is, that, as you can see, there's $400,000 of fire vehicle authorized and unissued. That's money that can be used to pay off the fire vehicle that we'll be receiving February, March of next year. So to the extent we were to do any additional fire vehicles, we don't have the authorization, and we would have to come back, get authorization to borrow. In addition to that, it would also require putting debt service payments into next year's budget. So tonight there's no vote, not asking for any approval of anything, but prior to going to the council and starting the bonding process, which depending on the amount we're borrowing, just drafting the ordinance could be anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000, depending on how much we're borrowing. So I don't want to go to bond council and spend that kind of money if there's an alternative path that you might find equally or more. So I just wanted to start the dialogue, start the thought process of how we want to go about potentially doing some of these items. You'll note as we get out into the future years, there's some things at the library. The roof needs to be replaced, chiller, air conditioning area over the library community center. We continue to have some additional fire vehicles. We continue to have the HVAC, and then Sam, I know this is what we've talked about for a couple of years, the pools, the pool buildings, they're quite old in work. And then also, not to be forgotten, boilers at the schools. Those are important. And we start to get into some window replacements at the schools too. So there's a lot of things on here. Certainly interest rates are low. They continue to be low, even though they're coming up, but they continue to be at historic lows. At the same time, that also means the money you have sitting in fund balance is earning historic low returns. You're looking at probably $50,000 to $60,000 in interest this year. To the extent you might want to take some of that money, use it to pay for some capital rather than leave it sitting there. You have an opportunity to probably get better use out of the money with some capital. Again, no vote or anything, but I wanted to start the dialogue, kind of let you know where we're thinking. Last year, I came to you and recommended that you not do a borrowing because there were a considerable number of projects. They were approved, they were funded. Many of those are either nearly complete, having completed, or at least are in the process. Being from the Duckworth High School, we talked about the softball field. There were a number of items that have been addressed over the last few years. And we were also able to address some of those with surplus money, insurance, vehicles and things that Mr. Simons is now moving forward to go purchase. So with that, I'll kind of pause before we jump into fire vehicles to see if there's any comments, thoughts, reaction to anything I've said.
Just a little more information on authorized but unissued. As I'm looking at some of those, is it correct? I don't know where we stand anymore with the high school renovations. Likelihood of us needing 1.6 million ever.
Not unless our audit goes really south to pay the state money. The money is only sitting there because we have not entered the audit phase. We're in the last stages, working something, getting the final pieces together, some legal reviews for bid books and things. Once we finally get approval from the state to say, okay, you're in line, your audit will be happening, my intent is to then go back and ask the board to deauthorize that bond. I just leave it out there until the project is really busy.
So let's talk about that part, the deauthorization project. So it looks like some of this stuff's been hanging around for open space 2003, open space 2006.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem to me, I mean, maybe were those leftover amounts of previous authorization, and we just leave it open?
The idea behind it,
Should we, and I guess this is leading to the question, should we clean it up, you know, take these things off?
Answer to your direct question, yes, they're left over from acquisition, from open space acquisitions from quite a few years ago. They were actually intentionally left there. Every year I review with bond counsel, the list, and we kind of go through where we are with each one. Those were intentionally left on the last few years. They certainly could be deauthorized. They are more open-ended than each of these other projects, and they were left there because there's no cost to leaving them. There's no harm in putting them out there. Should the town have an opportunity to acquire open space, typically it would be unexpected. Somebody might own a large chunk of property, passes away, family doesn't want it, and the town has an opportunity to use some of this money to acquire property that was completely unexpected. You have an opportunity to move more quickly because you already have the authorization. But you wouldn't have to pay bond counsel for another authorization, and it would be in place. So those were intentionally left on, but if preference is to remove them, I will be going back for a few deauthorization items. Typically, I do it in February. As part of that process, I anticipate the fire rating upgrade probably by that point will be able to come off, and high school renovations hopefully by that point will be able to come off. And I can certainly add the other two. There's no harm in taking them away, but having already paid bond counsel for developing that, leaving the open space there gives you the opportunity down the line if you want that extra.
When the rating agencies look at our debt levels, they generally include those as looking as a negative factor against you because you've already authorized it. That's the only reason.
Yeah, they actually were very complimentary of the fact that the town has an annual process to review and call anything that's old and not leave it out there. We are overall, this is a fairly small amount of what we have outstanding. And if you think about it from a statutory standpoint, and we have from a statutory standpoint about 560 million available just under statute, potentially borrow.
Legally.
So
I think one of the things that might be helpful to me as we get a little closer, do you have any numbers on per capita debt as it relates to some of our, peer groups and such? I think that's, because we are so, we know we've been dealing with it since we started here, how much our debt level is, but I think it's good for people to look at that, down on that other level too. That's thrown around a lot, per capita. I think I'd like to just see what some of our neighbors, or our peer group is doing too. I think we all agree that
put your head in the right direction. Actually, when you look at the chart that shows the outstanding debt, while the number is quite high at $81 million, if you go back to the end of 2016, that number was $107 million. So that's more than $25 million worth of debt paid off in a 5-year window. That's considerable, especially when you think about the number of projects that you also completed in that time period. And there was some borrowing involved there. So net, you've done a lot and paid down.
that's
I mean, I agree with Jerry. I think that we're still at a high level of debt. So I'm not inclined to say let's use debt. Let's budget. As you mentioned, these open bond projects. Push comes to shove, and maybe we said, during the year, we say, needed something. It's a lot easier to transfer these to another, category as opposed to creating new bond.
Well, remember, this is authorization. This is not actually a bond. This is just
Understand
authorization.
that we already have a bond in place. Right?
Authorization.
In place. So it's quicker to transfer it to some other.
Well, you have to have an authorization. So, for example, if you wanted to do work in a police station, you could take money that has been used, which was bond premium, which is still debt, from the highway wash bay and put it into the police station if you wanted to do something. Those are just two examples.
But it's quicker than creating
Absolutely,
a complete new authorization.
absolutely. You might get something to say.
No, no, if it helps, I cannot possibly vote for mine.
Okay.
Whether it's fund balance, total money. Or Brook. I mean, fund balance, what do we have for all our pension liability? What's the actual number of fund balance? Give the actual number. What do we have, 17 million? But what's the actual number we have? It's not good. That's good.
When all is said and done, including what you've already appropriated in FY 22, you've got just shy of $13 million. It would be in the next section, F2.
That doesn't include the pension liabilities, right? Or does it?
No, if you took the
So
pension,
I was saying you subtract the pension liability.
you'd have 10.46 million.
No, I'm talking about the total liability. So everybody would be fired today at once.
You're unfunded liability, because you do have money put into
We do,
DB
so
and
our unfunded liabilities.
$2.5 million. No,
Considering we
Yes,
started.
because we've already appropriated like 5.3 million.
Yeah, so that's not bad. So we actually have like $10 million.
yeah. This chart here, if you were to look at the approved column, this is part of the talking point for potentially funding the fire vehicles. So the 2.5 million is approximately where we stand right now with unfunded pension liability. You're down to 5 active participants. You have a little over 3 million sitting in DB, and you have about almost $3 million in DC. It's a hybrid plan, so you have money, you have assets in there.
So we have 10 million.
Which, if you were to just take that and then say, how does that compare to the FY 22 budget? You'd be 11.1% against a policy of 11%. So you're in a good spot, even net of the pension, you're paying down the debt, and you're getting good stuff. I realize it's never, there's always going to be something that could be done. But the balance sheet is, I think, substantially improved. And places like Standard & Poor's, independent of all of you, recognize that. I mean, for 3 years, you've had a AAA bond. It doesn't get better. That's the best rating you can get.
I think one, what Mark was saying, I'm inclined to say we'll get to. I think a lot of these things that we're looking at here, or some of them anyways, would be perfect fit in my mind for that COVID.
The HVAC, stuff like that is easy. That's a no-brainer.
Keep us seamless. It's almost like a double win, get something done that we need. Not have one that
2026 is kind of
That's
the
the
magic year.
That's
And you can see the green bar on that bit. That's
That's
the magic.
close too.
And you're coming into
It's getting
budget in
there.
2023.
What happens in 2026?
That's
We're down in the 30s. Yeah.
And that's when the first set of bonds really start to fall off.
Sure, yeah, we playing off together. We'll think of you.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you.
So, Kevin, it's the $17 million number we see is without borrowing, correct? Yes. So the big elephant in the room, what happens if they come to us for the senior?
We don't worry about it because it's not gonna make it. That's right.
Well,
It's gotta come here first.
Yeah.
Gotta come through here before it goes around.
For those. All right, so I think cross that bridge when you get there, basically. So, all right.
I just have no numbers to go by yet.
All right.
Do you want to move to the next one?
Well, it's kind of a tradition.
This started higher.
So Mr. Simons is here to explain the need of the fire trucks, and I've already referenced the chart that talks about some potential funding scenarios to help
Yes. Unfortunately, I have to apologize. The item that was sent out the wrong one. This one? That was the one before proofreading and everything else. Afterwards. This is the updated one, just to get some. Good correct. So we start off with fire trucks were purchased. The original 4 Miracle of France fire trucks were purchased in 2002, right after 2001, when all the money was flowing nicely to emergency services. But we knew at that time that there would be a time that they need to be replaced. Usually on a fire truck, it's usually about 20 years to replace a fire truck. But we knew that. We tried to plan and move things around so they didn't all come up at the same time. Through some different things, they have to be coming up at the same time. Not being funded and for other problems. Unfortunately, the trucks that we're talking about, unfortunately, American with France went out of business in 2008. I'm sure you've heard me preach this 100 million times. And federal lawyer, federal judge said you need to liquidate all your assets. And they liquidate all their assets, there goes the parts inventory for these trucks. Yes, we still can get parts such as Rockwell axles and Allison transmission, and Detroit diesel motors. But the other parts are very, very hard to come by. There was a number of vendors or dealers that went in and purchased those that had a large contingency of these trucks out there. One of the biggest ones was out next to Phoenix, Arizona. And that's probably where most of our parts come from now, because he purchased almost everything. But you also got to realize that since 2008, there hasn't been parts manufactured for these trucks. So that's a huge problem. So the trucks we're looking at, the 4 are engine 4, engine 7, engine 8, and engine 12. Engine 12 we've taken care of. And in fact, when the truck comes in February, that'll be that replacement. That will go away. The next 2 we're looking at are engine 4 and engine 8. Engine 8 is located on the Berlin Turnpike. It's the only pumper out of that station. It's the only squad out of that station. What I mean by squad is the squad unit that carries all the rest of the tools on it. Engine 4 is out of Kensington Station. It's an identical piece. It also, in Kensington, there is another pumper that runs for mainly structural fires. But engine 4 runs both the highways and throughout town with the terrestrial tools and its fire suppression capabilities. They are the 2 busiest pieces of equipment in town. As of this morning, at 11:59 this morning, the year's calls for fire service is 547. So it is not that the fire department is a slouch. When you look at the numbers, you look at that engine 8 that went out 300 plus times a year. That's probably about average. So they are quite used pieces of equipment. I gave you a little breakdown as to cost of ownership with the maintenance software. We track everything through the maintenance software, which includes depreciation of the vehicle, mileage, fuel usage, parts usage, labor usage. Everything goes through that computer. So I can give you some basic figures that and the only thing I do is hit the report, have it come out. Of what it costs for each one of those trucks. And you can see they're kind of high. Yes, depreciation drives them up quite a bit because depreciation is at 18 and 17 on those trucks. But then when you go down to material and labor, you got one truck there that's pretty high. That's engine 8. And again, that's not only material and labor or parts and labor, that's also including the fuels that are in that truck. But when you look at the corresponding that piece versus the amount that is used, and not downgrading engine 4, but engine 8 has been the busiest truck for a number of years, of course, being on the highway. So just a little bit more during the pump test last year, both of those trucks failed the pump test. And needed some extensive work. The problem is that those pumps were made especially for hail. So, or made by hail, especially for American and France. So when American and France went out, nobody built any parts for them anymore. Because nobody was gonna have those pumps. So some of those parts that we put in there, we modified or we put alternate parts in that we could find. And that also happened if you go down, skip down to page 2 of that, when engine 7 happens to be one of the sister trucks on the East Berlin station. It lost a bearing in the bottom of the transfer case. And the transfer case is a piece of equipment that transfers the power from the rear wheels to the pump. So whenever that truck was moving, that transfer case is operation. Well, it lost the bearing down there. When it lost the bearing down there, it also tore up some of the other parts in the transfer case. So Hale, who made the transfer case, and it says right on side of Hale, we call them up until they find XYZ for parts. No, not available. So then we went to sourcing it. My friends out in Phoenix, no, not available. And there's a couple other places around that have a lot of these trucks. They're no, not available. What we recommend is that you take and replace the transfer case and the pump. All right, so what's the dollar figure on that? Well, by the time you're done, you're gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000. So we use a place out of East Hartford. A lot of shaft making, axle fixing, things like that. We took the pile of parts up there and we took the specifications, which is key because AO gave us a specification, gave us some drawings. We went up there and they actually did a nice job. They made the parts, the shapes, everything for. They made us bushings and we got away from where the bearings were in the case, where they were tore up. They did a nice job, but it was a long process. And it was a cost. It didn't cost us $30,000, but we were into it for a few thousand. But we were able to repair it. But also the truck was down. And that's something you don't want to have with any type of piece of equipment. So that's what we usually have to do. And well, you talk to the guys. The funny thing is the door handles. You would think the door handles would be something off an RV. They were specially made for America. So while we're making new door handles, you can ask the firemen, they got tie wraps on the door handles to open them up. You know, it's things like that. They're done, you know. So obviously knowing that these products are coming up for replacement, we started the process a year ago. Once we finished the engine tanker, we started the process on the next one, and pretty soon we'll start the process on the following one. But the 2 squad units in engine 4 and engine 8 will be built identical. So that was an easy one. We just got 2 groups of people who did the same studies, and we're currently ready to finalize those. COVID hits, and none of this has to do with the age of the trucks. Well, COVID hits. COVID hits and commodities go up through the roof. Anything you buy now is probably a lot more expensive. So last year through COVID, usually the choice vendor, which is Pierce Manufacturing, which is owned by Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Usually they have a price increase in January, somewhere between 3 and 5%. Well, middle of last year, just because of commodity costs, $12,000, which doesn't sound like a lot when you start weighing in that the truck is $800,000. This year in January, which is usually a 3 to 5% increase, they're now talking that it's probably going to be somewhere around 10%. That's commodity costs. You see it at grocery stores and Home Depot. So talking to Kevin about it, He says, why don't you come and see the finance board and explain this? Everybody says, well, when I come looking for money, well, Simon wants new trucks, Simon wants new tractors, Simon wants new police cars. Well, you know something, that'd be great if I could take my wife to dinner. I can't. So they're not Simon's trucks, they're the town's trucks. And that's what we.
So you're asked, sorry, it's 5 trucks, one of which we paid for half of.
Well, there is 4 trucks that were purchased in 2002. We have another truck that's purchased in 2008, and that one isn't seen as much usage right now, so we're sitting pretty good with that one, and we can hold off on that one as we, if you look at my spreadsheet, you see there's a window there of well, it was a little bigger now, I think it's three years now, it's the window, in which there's no trucks, and I've always said that during that period of time, what we really need to do is we really need to sit down and think about where exactly we're going. Because there's a lot of other variables in here. Obviously, we're a volunteer fire department. Volunteerism is way down. Obviously, there's other concerns in town. New buildings coming up. I won't say high-rise buildings, or 3-story buildings. But they're different than the raised ranches that we're used to going to. Falls are way up. So, you know, where are they going to be in 2 years? Where are they going to be in 3 years? Where are they going to be in 10 years? Well, before we replace that 5th truck, we need to figure out do some long-range strategic planning and see where we're going to be. So that's why there's only these 3 trucks that are remaining for purchase at this time.
You mentioned once, right? I mean, we have more apartment buildings. You're gonna need different vehicles and you're gonna need to train you guys.
We're going to need to train them differently. You know, the difference with those buildings is, and there will be protection systems in that building, such as smoke alarms, sprinkler alarms, things like that. Your call volume is going to go up, and we're going to be doing things a little differently because they're going to be wooden buildings, not like Prentice Place, it's a brick building, or Sherwood Falls. They're all wooden buildings with void spaces and things like that. So the guys are going to have to be on their game. They're going to have to be on it. You know, the equipment. The only difference that I could see with the equipment that you would be looking at is the possibility of another area. And I don't even know if you're going to go that way. Because the pumpers are going to pump water. It's just a matter of how much hose are we going to be able to carry to get up to the 3rd floor back bedroom. Things like that.
Jim, based on your spreadsheet, it's fair to say 12, the replacement of 12 is combining for 15.
Yes.
So you've taken 2 and made it.
Right, we're
one.
downsizing. We're downsizing, and we're downsizing for a couple of reasons. So we're downsizing to become more efficient. Obviously, we don't have the manpower to run out all the trucks, so we combine 2 trucks and put that water on one piece. So that piece will carry 2,000 gallons in that district, which is the south end of Berlin, Chamberlain Highway, all the way over to Elk Road, all the way up to probably North Road and the highway, Route 9. There's no water out there. So we need to bring all the water on our back. Well, we used to bring our water in the back by having a couple trucks come in. Well, now we're going to do it more efficiently with just 2 trucks coming in. One will be the older engine tanker, which carries 3,000. The other one will be the new one, which carries 2,000, which will give us 5,000 gallons of water. It sounds like a huge amount of water. It's really not. Start spraying water out 250, 300 gallons.
What time frame are you looking at to replace these in a year?
Well,
Years?
well, they all need to be replaced, and you know, if you ask me, I would say 2 squad units got to go, and then the 3rd one will be out. If you were to fund a unit, just fund 1 truck in December, you still won't see that truck until 2023, and actually the lead time has gone out now, so it'll probably be March, April 2023. And that's the problem with everything, is the lead times now.
Yeah.
The lead times are way out. So even like the police cruisers that I'm going to council with next week, you're not gonna see those till this time next year. Yeah.
So I know we were talking about trying to stagger them so that we always had one order and we were, funding it 6 months out, the next one will come in. I mean, is that something that's still practical or you gotta pick the pace up a little?
Can I come to say something? That's knowing what I know. Like these guys are out there, there could be failures. If out there trying to rescue someone, and they can't, and someone breaks down. And the lead time is extended. We're putting ourselves in the predicament. I think the package machine for stuff against. For all three. For all three. I mean, the door handles don't work. Kind of about.
Well, what kind of time frame? A year?
I would
Or
say
the big trucks now?
would a year be suffice, like to order these things out?
You would not be ready to order all three immediately. We would be able to order 2 squad units because they're identical trucks. The engine, which would be going over to East Berlin, engine 7, that truck, you're looking at another, we're looking at 8 months for suspects to build that. So you're looking at another, you got to remember, we don't meet every day. You know?
But you're ready, you're ready, the council would approve, you're ready.
You're ready to order 2 trucks.
You do it before
You
January,
would say that.
you're standing to save about $100,000 a truck. I mean, these are 900,000 plus.
And you know what, and that would be a good idea to take that money out of fund balance. If we're sitting on, you're talking about taking money out instead of bonding it.
Which is scenario 2.
Yeah, which it would make sense. It would make sense to take that money out of fund balance and buy the fire trucks just for public safety. We don't have to bond it and order 2 trucks at one time and we share in good shape.
I will tell you that I will not put an unsafe vehicle on the road.
No, I know.
I'm
I
not
know.
telling you
We
that
know
they're
that.
unsafe.
We know
I'm
that.
telling
We
you
know
that they're
that.
a problem and they're at the end of the
We
year.
know that. You know, we're just saying that it would summer, you would get 2 trucks and it'd be great. Then you can sell those for whatever.
Like personally, I don't want you to make that decision in the sense of like, well, where versus security or security approval.
I make that decision.
You make them.
I know. but you shouldn't have to.
Whether it's a
That's
dump
his
truck
job.
or a police
Somebody's
car
gotta
or
do
what
it.
it is.
Yeah.
It's my job.
I mean, I would say that we could have a consensus and send a message to the council that if they were to buy those 2 trucks and take it out of fund balance. We get a consensus tonight and send a message to the council for their meeting on Tuesday night and everything. We should start the process.
Is this on their agenda, Kevin?
I mean, I would think. that-
I'd like a little more time than that.
Me too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It doesn't make, see, one of the problems that I see is, and I know we bought them both at the same time, so they're probably gonna die at the same time, but isn't that like one of the problems we're trying to avoid is to have everything going at the same time, coming at the same time? If we're just pushing this down the road to have the same problem again, where we're gonna have to get 2 instead of 1.
And that's why you're starting to see them stack up again because
Yeah.
a few of them down the road previously,
Yeah.
you know.
That's my thoughts. We're basically doing the same thing all over again. A bit of our last time.
I think you're kind of you're in a tough spot because
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. You want to stagger them out. At the same time, because 4 were bought and they're so old, if this was a conversation 5 years ago, you probably have a broader window to say, let's stagger these. When you hear things that Jim is talking about with what they're dealing with on every single call, I mean, they'll make it work if it's at all possible to make it work if you stagger, but from everything Jim has said.
But if you have 2 identical numbers. It's making sense. You gotta scatter them.
I'll say this, I think it's easier to make a decision, as opposed to force to make a decision. Because reading this, at some point, you're gonna run out of it seems to catch up. Then what? We're stuck with a less truck,
I just,
as opposed to ordering one now, become available at some point sooner rather than later.
I just think that if you're buying two identical vehicles, whether you're buying regardless of scatter, maybe it's scattered for 2 months, 3 months on the road, right? Here, you just buy the company, buy another company, now, you need them, you need them.
You have to understand, looking at what you're saying there, is you have to understand is, I'm here now because I know that there's a price increase coming up.
That's what I'm saying.
And there's gonna be a price increase coming up again next
I
January.
mean, I had-
There's no doubt about it. Plus,
I had a discussion with somebody today on the commodity market. Commodity market's not gonna,
that's gasoline.
commodity market is terrible, okay? I mean, you're making money, you got commodities, which the point is, there's nothing that's gonna stabilize. I was talking to somebody who's an expert on commodities. And you're not gonna stabilize the commodity market for at least maybe 2 to 3 years down the road, right now, unless this pandemic gets even worse, or whatever. So we're gonna see price increases for a long period of time on anything that has to do with commodities. This is what this is. Actually, do it. So the commodity market, the futures. Price.
Put it on the agenda for next month. And we'll go.
Well, the first step, if you
Gotta go to
appropriate,
council first.
if you go to council and call a town meeting, actually. do it on
That's what I'm saying. If
appropriation.
we have a consensus here, have the council put it on their agenda, and then you guys can call it to a vote. But I mean, it's not that-
They could put it on their agenda without.
I know, but if they know that we support it, it would pain a little bit for. I would like to get a consensus because I think that the needs.
Sort of just state the fact here.
I know.
Like you said, that's a war.
One more time.
It doesn't hurt the beg, doesn't hurt the beg, doesn't hurt the beg a little
Just a
bit.
little bit more. Kevin, we have the 400,000 that's in the authorization already, funds authorized on issue. Is that targeted to a particular piece of equipment?
Well,
Or can be used for any of these things that we're talking about?
Well, that's, if we do nothing more, that money would be used for the vehicle coming in
That's
February.
engine 12.
For the one in February?
For the one in
Okay. So,
I wouldn't bond, but part of bond authorization is appropriation, so I do have an uncommitted appropriate balance, so I can use it and pay for it and then bond at a later date. So we'll make good on 12.
yeah, okay.
You remember when we bought those plots? This first couple of 3-in-1 shop? This is 3-in-1 shop. Worked out very well. So I mean, I think it.
It was actually a similar conversation. The vehicles were in
Am I right?
real rough
I
shape.
mean, it did work out well for us, right? We saved money in the long run.
In the long run, you save money.
Yeah.
In the long run, you're gonna save money. You guys are the financial people, so I'm no financial expert. I can tell you about vehicles, and I can tell you that obviously, with the exception of a vehicle such as a car or pickup truck today, if you were to buy a new one, you would save money going forward. Today, if you bought one a year ago, it's worth more money than it is when you purchased it, just because
You're right.
there's a shortage of vehicles out
You're right.
there.
My son bought a Volkswagen. Got more money than he paid for that.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy.
But, and actually, I went to Foxborough for lunch today. And I went to Actor Park. There is not a car.
There's no cars.
You can't get a car.
There is nothing. So I was talking to Tommy Holowitz, and this is off thing. I was talking to Tommy Holowitz at John Fleck's retirement party, because I know he works over there. He goes, yeah, we got our monthly allotment. We got 3 cars. That's it. There's no cars, nothing available.
Saw a picture of that Super Duty trucks.
Oh,
Sitting waiting for ships.
Oh, yeah, they're there. I'm like, ship it all.
All built one parking.
yeah, off the top.
That happens when you don't make your own stuff.
What's gonna happen? So you have all these trucks sitting there, they're not doing one. Because a new model year came out already. You have all the dealers waiting for their cars so that they can resell those cars and pay their employees. It's a snow down effect. It's gotta crash down soon.
Trucks will be on sale.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait.
I know you're thinking timing when you think about it, just, we have the January increase and you're really down to 2 meetings. And actually council is down. I guess technically they have 3 meetings, but the meeting right after sort of an organizational meeting. So in order to be able to call the town meeting and take the vote, they would probably have to move at the next meeting. to go forward. I'm sorry, no, to do the non-budget appropriation, to appropriate fund balance. So,
But that's a one night process.
well, you have 1 meeting to call it, and then the next meeting is when they go do that. And they have to finish theirs before you. So that's not to say, if you really believe it was the right thing, the council could do their thing in December, you would do a special meeting just for that topic, and say, we'll approve it. And then Jim can put the work in if we do that.
One way or another, we're gonna finish up the specifications, and if they're put on the shelves, put on the shelf. Specifications are right now being reviewed by the engineers, to make sure that everything looks where we want it. So we're still moving forward.
I
You
would, I
can
would,
go on a day's notice, right? You got your.
Once they're all done, yes, we'll be good to go on this.
I would suggest that, I haven't seen anything here that would say to the council, don't proceed as they were going to do. Anyways, right?
Yeah.
Let them do their thing, and then it's gonna come to us again.
This, they could look at this at their next meeting and say, do this.
Right.
Yeah, right. There was a trouble here. I'm sure it'll be discussed.
Great. Any other questions? Brian?
Thank you for.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Number 3, do we want to have a meeting on the 9th of November or not?
That meeting was originally scheduled with the idea that the board would continue, and it's just second Tuesday and forward. Obviously, that's between the election and swearing in. So there are 2 options. One
When's the swearing in?
is 6 months. Well, you can continue to have a meeting. It would be this Board of Finance, and you have every option of voting, doing whatever you're going to do. Or you could move it out to the 16th. You could move it out even the week after.
When's the swearing in date?
16th.
Swear on that day. That's what we did when I got sworn in.
Have the
I
meeting.
was swearing in, and I walked down the hall. for the meeting.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here.
And by doing it now, we can notice the change more than 30 days in advance, so it'll continue being a regular meeting instead of a special meeting. Alter if you want.
Well, let me ask you this, if you think, what would the council's meeting dates be?
Well, they're gonna meet on the 16th.
Yeah.
In there.
As a regular meeting,
It's a regular meeting, but it's right after the swearing in, and it's always just organization.
so they wouldn't be addressing this in every by.
I would not see this. Usually keeps the agenda very
So
light.
they won't address it until the December.
They have an 11.
The end of November.
They have another one before the end of November.
And what's that do as far as timing, as far as?
Well, if the council has it on their agenda for next Tuesday, and they decide to proceed forward and call the town meeting, they could do it at their meeting at the end of November and vote at that point,
Okay.
in which case it could come to you in December.
Okay.
So that was kind of the logic of the timing. It's tight, but it keeps everything to regular meetings as opposed to special meetings. Things are running pretty well, pretty solid. Tax revenues are coming in as expected. Expenditures are largely in line. We obviously did have some larger pension expenses at this point that are really inflating true expenditure numbers that we have, but legal continues to be a potential risk as the lawsuit on Atkins Street continues. The town is continuing to defend itself and avail itself to legal remedies. Health and general insurance funds continue to be solid. Pension, I'm expecting to get the new valuation and the new liability soon, but I don't expect that number to change dramatically in about $2.5 million of funded liability, which is a good spot to be in.
Anybody do any research?
Every one of them is this past month. But
You know,
people ask me all the time. These are, I can tell you that every single officer down there is keenly aware of its status. Regularly, they follow the market, they're very much aware, so. Just a couple of things to draw your attention to on the unexpended education of the 2% fund. The council agenda next week will include appropriate for the lighting upgrades in the library. There's some money carried over a few years ago for cameras and some other things at the schools that have been sitting in capital non-recurring. Those cameras, there was considerable amount of money under a Homeland Security grant that was used. There's obviously a lot of cameras at the school, especially compared to when that money was carried over. So the board is going to be using a chunk of that money combined with the 150,000 to make up the gap. We talked last month, the bid came in at 180,000. So that will be moving forward, assuming the council approves the vendor, and that work, is important to folks, PD and teachers and others there. So that should move forward. And then the other storage cubbies will move forward as well. The rest of the projects are either completed or nearly completed. The public fire alarm was approved since our last meeting, so check that school off as well. Willard and Griswold are the two remaining schools to do the upgrades. That's good news, safety for the kids. And then risks and opportunities. I called out that the transfer, we all know that the ductwork came in a little higher than expected in terms of cost. Work to bring it down, but it's still a little bit higher. So we have some risk as to what was originally anticipated to be transferred into the general fund. I still have that as risk until the project's done. We don't know where the contingency will fall in. Eventually, that will materialize. So that was the one. How much was that? 1.2 million.
So are you saying here you're thinking it's only going to be 400, 500,000?
No, I'm thinking you're going to be probably 700,000 to 800,000. We expected about 500,000 to 600,000, and we're going to be close to 800,000.
So this is, the numbers here are what you would expect to be coming off of the original.
Right, that's the risk. And then wages and fringes, we can continue to have some vacancies there. We will be, it sounds like November 1st, we will have a new chief, so that position will be filled with savings that's been realized the last few weeks since August when the chief retired. Will go away of the chiefs. That's important to the opportunity. And we're continuing to monitor other things and looking for those. We did pay, I know this is something near and dear to all of you, we did pay the upfront initial charge to the VA consultants. So we expect that work to begin their consulting work, and hopefully in the next month or two, certainly before budget time, we'll be able to have that company, Symmetry, give a presentation to both the council and the board of finance, an opportunity to ask the consultants questions. I did follow the town manager. He doesn't see any reason why the shipment attorney that specializes in this work and get us other advice couldn't be available to the board as well. You mentioned waiting until Symmetry is done, kind of doing it in aggregate, but
Would that be a joint meeting?
that's what we were envisioning. That way it's just more efficient use of the consultants' time to be able to come in. And it gives everybody the opportunity to hear their presentation, but also all 13 of you can hear the questions that others ask. We ask the question that the council may want to hear the answer to as well. So that's our thought, and probably do it through Zoom. Probably do it through Zoom, so it'll be a little more convenient for everyone as well. That's it. Unless there's questions.
So moved.
Aye.
My monthly question. Have you heard from Pete?